Hello there, singers. It might not look like it at the moment, but I'm standing in the wonderful city of Vienna, Austria, where I am taking part and teaching in an international conference of voice teachers run by the Institute for Vocal Advancement. Yay! Anyway, it just so happens that I'm here for a very important anniversary. On this day, 195 years ago, in the city of Vienna, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony in D minor had its first public airing. This very building where I'm standing was owned by a coppersmith 200 years ago, and Beethoven rented out the top floor of this building where he's said to have locked himself away and worked on that very symphony. Now, what does all of this have to do with Total Voice TV? I think there's always inspiration we can find in the great artist, and so inspired by the life of Beethoven, his music, and his triumph over incredible personal hardships, I want to leave you with 3 tips today to take your singing further. This is Total Voice TV. Hello everyone, my name is Darren Wicks. I am founder of Total Voice Studio and I'm a contemporary voice teacher in Melbourne, Australia. Today we're talking about the symphony, about Beethoven, his life and music. So, the symphony was a popular form of music during the 19th and 20th century. The definition of a symphony is a large-scale work that is written for the orchestra. Typically, a symphony will consist of 4 contrasting sections that we call movements. Many composers, including Mozart, Haydn, Schubert, Mendelssohn, all put their hand to writing symphonies. But Beethoven is considered the father of the symphony because of his skill in writing symphonies and the fact that he elevated the form of the symphony beyond an everyday occurrence to something that was unique and demonstrated the skill of the orchestra to the highest degree. In total, Beethoven wrote 9 symphonies, and his last symphony that we're talking about today is considered by music critics to be one of his greatest masterworks. In writing the Ninth Symphony, Beethoven took an incredible amount of risks. First of all, he scored the symphony for almost double the normal size of the orchestra, and not being content just with a larger orchestra, he wrote in voice solos and a choir part for the final movement. I can imagine how electric the atmosphere must have been at the premiere of this symphony 195 years ago, where the choir and vocalists were sitting down almost doing nothing for the entire symphony, and only in the last minute do they stand up and deliver what's now known as the Ode to Joy melody. Which brings me to the first point of our talk today. As artists, we always have a choice where we can either be safe or take risks. The famous educator and psychologist Abraham Maslow, he once said, in any given moment we have 2 options: to step forward into growth or step back into safety. And another famous quote that's always stayed with me from Albert Einstein is this: a ship is safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships are built for. By taking risks, Beethoven was able to redefine how the symphony was viewed forever, and he pushed through to become one of the greatest composers of all time. In the same way, for you, learning to sing may feel a little bit unsafe. It may feel scary at times, and if it doesn't, you're probably not doing it right. As the last note of the symphony sounded in 1824, I can imagine that awkward moment of silence, and then almost spontaneously the audience rose to their feet. They were cheering, clapping loudly, waving their hats in the air, their handkerchiefs in the air, and their hands were outstretched. Music critics and historians have recorded none less than 5 standing ovations. The only problem was Beethoven was still conducting the symphony. He hadn't realized that the orchestra had stopped and he couldn't even hear the applause. It's now known at this stage of his life, Beethoven had become profoundly deaf. And in fact, Beethoven's career as a concert pianist had been cut short by his progressing deafness. I can't think of anything more debilitating for a composer than to be losing your hearing, and we know that it caused Beethoven a lot of depression, suicidal thoughts, and that he became a recluse. He hid himself away and buried himself in his work. And the top floor of this building is one of the places where Beethoven did some of his best work. What Beethoven originally thought was his greatest weakness actually became a source of strength. It's during this period of exile that Beethoven was able to complete some of his best work. So that brings us to my second takeaway message today. Singing is a very scary pursuit at times. It forces you to confront yourself. And so my second takeaway message is to push into your vulnerabilities and accept your weaknesses and your frailties. In the same way as they were for Beethoven, I'm convinced that you will find your strength in those areas. The impediment to your action, whatever you feel is holding you back as a singer, is the very action that you need to take. Without friction, without something to push against, without something holding you back or stopping you, many of us will not find the motivation that we need to achieve greatness. So if your journey to grow as a singer is difficult at times, take inspiration in Beethoven, who pushed into his areas of weakness and discovered some of his greatest strength. So the last point to leave with you today is, just like Beethoven, you may not know what the result of your actions will be and how those results may influence other people. Certainly Beethoven didn't know it at the time, but the melody he composed for the final movement of his symphony, the same melody that he couldn't hear, has gone on to become one of the greatest and most recognized melodies in music history. It's been quoted by composers in their works. During the Cold War, when Germany was divided into 2 nations, East and West, and they didn't have one single national identity, this melody was used as their national anthem during the Olympic Games. In 1907, a famous Presbyterian minister wrote words to that, "Joyful, joyful, we adore thee," and it became known as one of the greatest hymn tunes. In 1972, the European Council, now known as the EU, adopted this melody as the official anthem for the European Union. I hope we can all find inspiration in Beethoven's life, his music, and his triumph over adversity. So that's all I have for you today. I bid you farewell from the Beethoven House here in Vienna, Austria, on this 195th anniversary of Beethoven's most famous work, his 9th and final symphony. What are your thoughts about how we can be inspired from Beethoven's life and music? Please leave them in the comments below. If you have any suggestions for future episodes of Total Voice TV, I'd also love to hear them in the comments below. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. And until I see you next time, be well, and remember, you were born to sing.